The sun sets. A chill falls over the land. Thunder cracks. And you press through the undergrowth to the haunted old mill. The content mill, that is. It's Halloween and the internet is haunted, so draw a protective pentagram, light some candles, and make the sign of Mephistopheles as we conjure up the hates of clickbait. I'm Adam, with me are Ing and Avi as always, here to discuss whatever nonsense happened this week, or even today, because a lot of it happened today. From what I can see.
So much nonsense just has happened in like 24 hours, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's happened that, you know, as we said, is probably too depressing and not really clickbait, unless the world is becoming clickbait, which it might be. I think that would...
Some of the horrible stuff is actually clickbait versions of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's segue into that with the
Times magazine, which did an article right on the precipice of the Brazilian election, and with all the elections in the U.S., and right when President Donald Trump embraced the label of nationalist. Nationalism has a bad reputation, but it's what America needs.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's clickbait, but I don't know if we have to say anything more about it, but fuck you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Time's always been a pretty right-wing magazine, hasn't it? Am I imagining that? Because I remember they used to publish, like, before I even know who Charles Krauthammer was, they used to publish him all the time in the 90s, I remember.
Okay, no,
and,
Charles Krauthammer isn't real.
Well, they've been more right-leaning over the past year because they were bought out by a company that's owned by the Koch brothers. So that's...
But one thing I want to get clear, I do not believe that Charles Krauthammer is a real person. That's the name of a Hellboy villain.
And he does look a bit fake, too, if you've ever seen him. He kind of looks like he's been photoshopped
Are
somehow.
we sure that he's not, like, a Muppet?
A really good Muppet?
He does look rather Muppety, yes, it's true.
Or a bad Muppet, like one of the times when the Muppets do, like, a realistic person, but it's still obviously a puppet.
Oh gosh.
So creepy. Then his antithesis is Gritty, the Philadelphia mascot.
I'm sorry, I believe you mean the anti-fat mascot.
The anti-fat mascot. I love that. That's the best, that he's become the anti-fat mascot. Yeah, that's... that's not going to end well legally, but I love the the short-term effect that's
like
had.
The Antifa actually give a fuck until litigation actually happens, because that's why they don't use Pepe anymore, because litigation happened.
Okay, I don't think the anti-fat are going to do things that will require litigation, like trying to claim Giddy actually as their own to the point where they claim that they have a right to publish books using it. That's where the Pepe litigation came from. Antifa's gonna bother with that because they just want to make memes of the scary Muppet Man.
Yes.
That's true.
Well, and the Philadelphia, I believe it was the town council, passed a resolution where they sort of went, Gritty is a beloved Antifa mascot or something like that. And they were clearly, like, enjoying it. Like, they were chuckling at it. Like, it wasn't...
well, that's good, at least.
I don't know if you saw that. Like, it's somebody, literally somebody drafted a resolution. I'm sorry, I don't know if it was literally the Philadelphia Flyers organization or if it was the actual town of Philadelphia. But it was a semi-official meeting, and they literally said it's resolved that Gritty is a beloved figure who stands for... I can't remember if they specifically said Antifa, but it was clearly going, it's we're cool with this. This is kind of funny. We think it's great that he's been embraced this way, right? And why wouldn't you, really? Because it is such a great,
Well, considering the initial backlash against Gritty...
Was there a backlash?
People fucking hated... People did not like Gritty from the get-go just because he looked kind of funny and weird and it didn't make any goddamn sense. And then he was sort of adopted by the Antifa, and then so people were kind of okay with it.
Do people have this standard with mascots where they're like, no, that one's weird. Like, the fanatic or whatever he's called that's okay, that thing. But this Muppety guy is too weird for us. Like,
the Philly fanatic is really weird. But in the case of the fanatic, he's been around for so long at this point that nobody can imagine it being anything else.
Yes. This is what I wish people would consider more often when critiquing anything, pop culture, anything. They're like, oh, that's so weird. It's like, well, imagine how weird the thing that you love since childhood was when it originally appeared. I would say this was Star Wars. People are like, think about what a weird movie that would have been in 1977 when there was no context for it. And
that's
people,
true.
You know, and people are like, well, it has to be very predictable like Star Wars. Like, Star Wars is not predictable in the context of 1977. It's predictable because we're all used to it now, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to mention, we've seen other stories done in a similar fashion.
Right.
So that we're all kind of used to seeing those stories being told over and over. Not necessarily a bad thing.
Yes.
But it's like, just because you've, read other books and seen other movies does not mean that Star Wars being predictable is a bad thing.
No, I'm sorry. It's the internet. If it's predictable at all or cannot be broken down into tropes, despite the fact that it is mutually contradictory, then it is immediately awful.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's right, because Ant-Man and Wasp spoiled by foreshadowing Avengers 4. That's right.
Okay, I don't even know how
people were complaining about that when Ant-Man and Wasp was still kind of fresh in theaters, that, oh my god, they have spoilers, and it's like, it's called foreshadowing, people. It's a legitimate writing I don't even fucking know, because I haven't seen the movie.
I wasn't even referencing that, I was just doing a general mock, and...
but that was a thing that happened, several months ago.
I mean, it foreshadowed it in that it ties into the end of the last Avengers movie, but I don't see... I mean, it's what they're doing. They're setting things up and then continuing them in the next movie. That's
exactly. And it's just kind of like, this is what they've been doing for years. Literally.
Empire Strikes Back spoils Return of the Jedi by having Darth Vader be Luke's father, and that's the real struggle in Return of the Jedi, and they spoiled it in Empire Strikes Back. I can't believe it.
Really? Spoilers. I have yet to see all of Star Wars.
That movie is only 45 years old.
I have yet to see all of the Wars of Stars.
I have yet to witness all of these conflicts, Celestial.
All right, let's talk about an actual article.
Conflicts.
Stellar conflict sounds kind of cool, actually.
Oh, these nebulous skirmishes.
Okay, so you've got a lot of them, clearly. Yes.
Yes. Let's talk about an actual article. Where are we starting?
The 12 kids who won't vote.
12 young people on why they probably won't vote.
Right. At the New York magazine Intelligencer, I don't know why the magazine has a special website folded into its own self called the Intelligencer, but they do. It's profiles of 12 kids. I'm going to guess they're all white, although I guess we're not 100% sure on that.
Well, I mean, the 3 pictures that they have are all white people.
They're interviewing people from Austin, San Francisco, and Berkeley. Orlando, Florida. I know that doesn't necessarily make them white, but I don't want to generalize, but...
Although, truth be told, somebody named Samantha in Old Bridge, New Jersey is probably white. Same thing with Reese in Hudson, Ohio. You're probably white.
I don't know. Anyway... They all sound white, let's put it that way.
By the name or by the virtue that they're the topic of this story?
Well, let's not make any nasty statements here, but...
I'm not. But they all have acceptable American names.
Yes.
And this is coming from somebody whose real name is not an acceptable American name, because everybody looks at it and then doesn't know how to pronounce it, even though it's completely phonetic.
Avantika sounds like an insurance company to me. I don't know. I kind of like that. Anyway.
Wow.
Sorry.
It's okay.
No, I bet it sounded like it had like Integra or Acura. It's like the Jerry Seinfeld routine.
This is Avi's last episode because it's the one where Adam committed a microaggression.
Just casual racism. Yeah. It's fine.
So if anyone wants to see Adam, he'll be on Louis C.K.'s new podcast.
Oh, gosh. It's the only one that would take me, yes. Anyway.
I just want to talk about Samantha first, because she says that there's ways to be an informed non-voter, and it's just kind of like, if you're a non-voter, You're technically useless in a democracy. I don't care how informed you are. You're useless.
I can see an argument being made specifically for people who cannot vote. Like, if...
That's different. This is somebody who can vote. She has an absentee ballot waiting for her to be filled out.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, she does say she's got an absentee vote. She didn't say she would definitely not vote. She said she's probably not going to vote.
Oh.
And that she's, disillusioned by 2016, basically. She was a Hillary Clinton supporter.
Which is understandable.
But then why would you not vote?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I understand the idea of being an informed non-voter over being an uninformed voter, but you know what? If you believe you're an informed non-voter, just become an informed voter, and then you're actually participating in democracy.
Yeah, just do the shitty mail-in thing, and then...
Like, I've already mailed in my ballot. It's been counted.
Well, let's be clear about Samantha, though. She does say, like, this is actually kind of needless to say, it's a complicated subject, but she does say very clearly that she's doing grassroots organization and she's getting active and stuff like that. So she's not just sitting back and letting what she will happen. She's one of these people, and I've spoken to some of them, who legitimately don't believe that voting is making... And to be clear, also, she's in New Jersey. That's a pretty blue state, right? So it's not like
as much as you think.
No?
Sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, remember, we fucking elected Christie.
Well,
yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
It's also another thing to keep in mind that we're also not a swing state. So she might also be sitting there with her absentee ballot thinking, my vote doesn't matter. We aren't one of the more important states. Why should I vote?
Except our senators definitely are, because we're a purple state.
Exactly.
Which means that this isn't a presidential election, so we definitely are a swing state.
Like, my general attitude towards all this stuff is, I think there's a lot of footnotes and asterisks you can put next to, I have issues with the democratic process. I don't get the point of not voting. That's the thing I don't get. People who say, and I mean, maybe I can see people who didn't want to vote for Clinton if they were in a safe blue state. I wouldn't have agreed with that necessarily, but the thing I always say, and I really wish people would remember this, October 2016, everyone was 100% convinced Hillary was just going to win in a walk, and there was nothing else to do. So whenever we say, oh, you people who stayed home in 2016, it's like, yeah, but everyone thought Hillary was going to win with no problems at all, and so people went, you know what, I don't like her, so it's my protest non-vote. I'm not going to vote for her as a...
That actually really pisses me off, having a protest non-vote.
Well, but everyone had been saying consistently, Hillary's going to win. Hillary believed she was going to win. Trump believed she was going to win. Like, it was clear that both the Trump and Clinton camps were 100%, oh yeah, Hillary's going to win. And Trump was, like, gearing up to be like, oh, they stole the election, and it was blah, 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 blah. Like,
oh yeah, he was definitely gearing up for that. And he was a snooty-ass bastard when he did win in his speech afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I mean, they were definitely, everyone was surprised by the fact that Trump won, quite frankly. So, I mean, I'm not going to judge too harshly someone, to me, who was in a blue state. They were totally solid, and they said, you know what, I'm really upset about Hillary. I know we're not going to get Trump. It doesn't mean support for Trump. It just means that just shows you, look, there was some hesitance about you. Because that does mean things. That can send a signal. We always talk about non-voters and blah, blah, blah. The real problem was, that they stole the election. Like, that was the real problem, was all the vote rigging going on and all the voter suppression and everything, and that's the issue here as well. I mean, going back to the Bush years, I think it was the 2004 election.
What are you talking about? There is a ton of devout Democrat Jews who really wanted Pat Buchanan.
I'm not, condoning anything anyone says in this article. They're all, they all sound like clueless idiots, frankly. It's that kind of article where, like, they deal with that and they don't deal with, like, massive voter suppression and huge problems that are happening.
This is why I selected it, because this is basically millennials are killing democracy. No, and the whole point of it is to give older people a thing to be pissed off at those kids for. Is this a big trend? I don't know. I do know that they had to go looking for these 12 people.
Yeah, they're all, like, in their 20s. So they're all younger than us.
But they went specifically looking for non-voters. It's not like a thing that it's like, are people voting? And they got a high number of people saying, no, fuck that. To get the story, You specifically go out, hey, we want to talk to non-voters, and big surprise, this is the people who aren't voting.
I'll be honest, when I was around the age of 18, I didn't vote in that particular election. But that's also because I didn't know how to procure an absentee ballot at the time. And there were people that I've met who didn't even know that mail-in ballots were a thing. Like, They thought that you had to go to a place, the voting booth. So I feel like it's going to say that it seems like these 12 people aren't actually underprivileged, that they don't know these things, because some of them very clearly have mail-in ballots. So it's just kind of like, you have this information. You're not uninformed as a result. You need to be informed and a voter. That's how I feel.
Sorry, the point I was making is that they made a decision to run this article rather than one informing people how to vote or interviewing people who perhaps wanted to vote and couldn't.
Right. Yes. That's the issue. That is a huge deal. The narrative that's being pushed in a lot of quarters is, oh, it's just those people who won't get up their butts and vote. There's no denying that for whatever reason, there's always been fairly low young person voter turnout in the US. That has been an issue. And I mean, but even then, it does have to do with roadblocks. Like, people do put up roadblocks.
Yeah, and it's not the areas you thought, because remember, you don't need to be in, like, Podunk, nowhere, Arkansas. Yeah, I'm sorry offending there, because my wife got her absentee ballot rejected. I'd tell you the actual reason for it, but the actual reason for it is because some Republican got a hair up their ass and is doing it to prevent the voter fraud.
Right. And I mean, it's been clearly, I mean, hopefully everyone listening to this knows this, but it's been pretty clearly established that voter fraud has never been a major issue. Like, for one election, they did a study. Yeah, they did a study, and like something like 2 cases of voter fraud were confirmed. And yeah, but also just straight up. And I mean, it really kills me. We're really talking about political stuff here. It's a real laugh a minute here, but
I specifically wanted to just bitch about the boomers bitching about millennials,
yes.
But
the boomers bitching about us.
Yeah. But you're right. That is what this is. This is the boomers saying, oh, look at these kids, and they won't. And I mean, again, there is some validity to the fact that the youth vote has always been the lowest turnout for whatever reason, and the olds are always the highest turnout.
Okay, well, the reason for that is that we hold the fucking elections on Tuesday. That's not a day off.
Yeah. If voting day was a national holiday, and it would be a completely different story.
That's what's frustrating, is that it doesn't seem like the Democrats are fighting very hard for the things that would benefit them politically, which is the baffling thing. Like, just on a procedural level, just from basically like, oh, this will help us win. Why don't they embrace that?
Do you want me to go into, like, my full conspiracy mode?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Because basically the Democratic Party is a placeholder for any genuine leftist movement. So effectively, and this is why, like, Schumer is absolutely a fucking failure at most things he does, he is basically paid by donors to be a jobber in wrestling terms.
He literally leaps up and sabotages them. Like he recently jumped up and was like, well, both sides are bad, at a time when a mad bomber is running around. And he's like, yeah, but, people are getting yelled at in restaurants, so we're both bad, obviously.
No, I would rather see the dickheads be afraid to go to public restaurants.
Like, he's leaping in to defend the Republicans in every given situation, and he said things like, oh yeah, we're not going to prosecute Trump.
Just to get back to the article, I'm reading somebody else who's complaining about having registration by mail, but they don't have stamps.
Yeah, a few of these people are very easily defeated. And we've been complaining about how hard it is to get registered, but some of these people seem like...
I understand having a chronic illness, and that can impede you to do a lot of things. Okay, that's fine. But you can ask somebody else then to get you stamps.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can order stamps online and have them delivered to you.
Yeah.
That is a thing the U.S. Post Office does.
And stamps.com, but,
Right.
I'm actually going to defend seemingly the indefensible.
Which is?
For the younger generation.
Yes.
It is quite possible that they have never had to use stamps. No, so that the very concept of where do I get stamps is like a thing.
But the younger generation has also had Google their entire life.
Yeah, I know that they should Google that, but look, I'm married to a teacher, so yeah. The consistent Google deficiency allergy that shows up is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I can kind of relate to that. You just don't want to Google it, even though it's right there at your fingertip. You're just like, no, tell me what you heard, and I want that.
There's one observation that's very true. It is my favorite thing once I learned it. That said, if you want people to help you with something, like if you're trying to learn something and want some help from people will not respond if you just ask, I need some help with the thing. So the best way to do it is to get on Twitter and say the thing that you're trying to do is impossible. And within the hour, I would get a bunch of people very rudely telling me how to do it. And
oh my God.
And they would call you an idiot, but you would get the help that you couldn't get.
So what you're saying is don't ask nicely, be an asshole. Great. Well, this is a wonderful world and society we live.
Also, boy, has editing it really changed my perspective, because before we were like, yes, politics, this is a fun thing to talk about. I love talking about this with my friends. Now I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, none of this is fucking usable.
Hope you're listening.
Let's continue on.
I'm going to comment how it's not usable as a way to justify not wanting to edit it, because then that joke's there and I have to leave the rest of the stuff in there to justify it. Okay, there, I just saved myself 15 fucking minutes of editing.
Well, okay, let's move on.
Okay, then let's do a poo.
A poo I figured would be a relatively short one. And this is only included because I just know that Avi's ranted on this before.
Well, I did watch The Problem with the Poo, and I do agree with his points that, like, yeah, sure, when they first introduced him, it was kind of okay, because there really wasn't a lot of representation at the time, but we have so much representation now, it's just kind of like, just because something was progressive at one point doesn't mean it stays progressive unless you actively do something, and they haven't with the Pooh.
Yeah, well,
so
he was not progressive when he was introduced. He was kind of a goofy stereotype, and they worked and made him like a very three-dimensional character, and he was interesting and likable.
You could have done a lot better.
Even as a stereotype, having an Indian character was still more rep than other places.
A lot more rep than other places.
And I mean, Simpsons, or if you look at early Simpsons, they were pretty good about that. They were trying to make sure, Springfield wasn't all white. They kept putting in black characters, and they tried to make sure there was a bit of diversity to Springfield. They didn't maybe go as far as they could have, but at least there was some.
Smithers inexplicably became white in between episodes.
Yeah.
But also, keep in mind that this is the era where Short Circuit is having a white guy play an Indian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
this is your response to The Problem with the Pooh, this is your response instead of either A, hiring an Indian writer who maybe can do a full Apu episode that like really delves into the character and progresses him further than what he was before, or B, hiring a sensitivity writer who potentially has an Indian background who can check to make sure you aren't doing something stupid.
Well, apparently what happened was that this guy, Adi Shankar, who was who's an animator, he says he pitched a script, and he did a whole thing where he said, okay, here's a script you can use for Apu. And he went, and that was literally, he pitched them a script where he said, this will handle a lot of the problems with Apu. And they basically said, well, we're writing the character out of the show, so that's why we can't use the script. And now they've kind of walked it back, and Al Jean, who's one of the main producers, said, "Well, that guy doesn't speak for the show."
Oh, they have walked that back already?
Hank Azaria did eventually go on, I think, Letterman. Or no, not Letterman. Somebody's talk show. It wouldn't be Letterman. What am I talking about? He went on somebody's talk show, and he basically
Who's Letterman, Grandpa?
You see, back in the old days, there used to be 2 talk shows, and only 2.
Yeah.
His speech that he gave later on a talk show was, people thought that was fairly graceful of him. But again, he's not 100% in the position to go in and say, we're getting rid of Apu. And it was Matt Groening that everyone got pissed off at after that, because he was very dismissive of the documentary from what I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if he sat and thought about it and realized, okay, maybe I should take a more sympathetic tone with this, then that's fine. That just means he's trying to better himself as a person. And I
give him credit that he did watch the documentary and came away agreeing with it. Like, he thought it was he thought the argument was well made.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Avi, did you say Hank Azaria then said he felt they should recast the character, or he agreed with that idea, or was it somebody
I think
else?
it's in here that it actually says that they should recast the character.
He said he's willing to step aside and have the character recast.
And have somebody of actual Indian descent do the
Avi,
voice instead.
To ask Avi about this, if they did do that, and they kept Apu basically as he is, but they had someone of Indian descent voicing him...
No, they need to change the writing for the show as well.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what they can do, because truth be told, I have not watched The Simpsons in years. And it kind of feels like The Simpsons needs a new writing staff in general, because it doesn't know what the fuck it's doing anymore.
I was going to say, insert a joke here about how much of a controversy this is, because it relies on the hypothetical idea of people still watching The Simpsons.
Yeah, there's that too. And truth be told, if they're just going to get rid of Apu, why don't they just end the series and let Matt Groening do all of the other fucking shit he does? It's not like they don't make Simpsons comics or something like that, and he can continue any storylines he wants to in there. And he just did Disenchanted on Netflix, so it's not like he isn't getting deals or something. Like,
well,
The Simpsons really need to go on is the real question here.
In terms of Matt Groening, obviously, as the famous quote from when it was good, where they had Troy McClure go, "Who knows what adventures they'll have between now and the time when the show becomes unprofitable." So that's the reason they're keeping it going. But Matt Groening, I believe, has said, well, one of the reasons I keep it going is that it's giving work to all my peeps, and I want them to keep working, and if I stop the show, they would have to find new jobs. And
even though it's mostly animated in Korea?
I don't know. Well, there's a team in America and Korea, but you're right.
Yeah, but it's mostly animated in Korea because it's cheaper to animate either in Korea or, hilariously, it's cheaper to animate in India.
Really?
Especially if it's a lot of 3D animation and special effects goes to India.
Really?
Yeah. When me and my friend Celine, we were watching Venom, and we actually watched until post-credits, and like more than half of the special effects team all had Indian names. So that doesn't necessarily mean it was in India, but there's a pretty good chance it was in India. It was some Indian studio. So
it's also worth pointing out, since we mentioned Korean studios, the way things go is that the base animation will be done in studio by the animators, and then the in-between frames will be shipped out to an overseas studio.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's a pretty big American, side to the production for sure. So, I mean,
Yeah, I was just correcting because we made it seem like The Simpsons, everything is being drawn in Korea. Yeah. A lot of the very tedious work gets subcontracted out.
Yeah.
Well, as we saw, Simpsons themselves made fun of that. I'm here in Korea for a look at how American cartoons are made.
Yeah.
Which is barely even a joke anymore. That was hilarious.
Well, I mean, there was also that Banksy opening, which was, basically about how the animation industry in overseas is like a sweatshop. Yay! Anyway.
Steven Universe
about Venom?
Steven Universe also did the joke when they visited Korea and visited an animation studio where they're working on the animation for that episode.
Oh God, that's great.
Yes.
so shall Venom, which Adam hasn't seen yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Shall
Venom
we make Adam feel bad for his poor life choices?
Yes, I know. You enjoyed it a lot. I do want to see it.
It's a great love story between a man and a parasite.
Oh, right. Our actual story for why we brought that up is... Technically, it's not really a clickbait story, but I hadn't seen Avi in person since she and the rest of our friends saw it, so I wanted to use this as an excuse to talk about Venom.
Let's talk about Venom.
So the article is how Venom's unspoken symbiote love story beat out the internet's most popular pairings. That kind of is clickbait. I'm not sure I agree it's not clickbait.
Okay, it's clickbait,
anyway.
But... It's clickbait. It is clickbait. It's just not clickbait that really circled around a whole lot. There was talk on Tumblr for a bit about how it knocked Clance, which is the extremely popular pairing from Voltron of Keith and Lance. It dropped that down to the second spot, and Symbrock took over as as the most popular ship on Tumblr.
You know, there doesn't need to be a shipping name that combines their names when the combination of the two is Venom. That's what it's called.
Technically, in the movie, that's not the case.
I know.
The ship is an actual character.
I have to cite one of the biggest laughs I've ever gotten was Stephen Colbert when he was talking about celebrity couples like Brangelina and Bennifer, and then he talked about William H. Macy and Felicity Huffman as Philium H. Muffin.
Oh, God. I mean, I will fully admit that there are some ships where the name Smoosh just doesn't work, but okay. Symbrock is pretty good.
Yeah. The two of them make out a lot or something like that.
They just have a very close relationship, and if you want to read that as being romantic, there's enough there in the movie that you totally can. But there's also enough not there that if you don't want to read it that way, you don't have to. And me and my friend, Celine, who I saw the movie with, when we walked out, we were both actually kind of upset because we know that the comics aren't like the movie at all. Because Venom was invented because of 90s edgelord.
Actually, correct me on this if I'm wronging, because you probably know it better than I do. But if I have it correct, what happened was that in the 80s, I believe in the Secret Wars storyline, Spider-Man was given a new... his suit got destroyed while he was on an alien planet. They gave him a new suit, which was all black, which was a cool look. And he was a ninja. Yeah. And then eventually, like a few years later, they decided to reveal that had been an alien symbiote the entire time. Yes. As we more or less saw in Spider-Man 3, the Sam Raimi movie. And that decided it was evil. He had to get rid of it. It latched onto another guy named Eddie Brock, and he became a villain for Spider-Man.
Yes.
So that was that. Yeah.
And technically, Peter Parker did something to ruin Eddie Brock's life, which is why Eddie Brock wants to kill Spider-Man.
Right. But Venom, the symbiote, needed a host of some kind, so he was the real villain in that sense, basically.
I mean, largely that origin story isn't in the movie, although you could still link Peter and Eddie Brock because there's mention of something happening in New York with the Daily Bugle with Eddie, which is why he moves out to San Francisco? Diego? San Francisco. So he moves out to San Francisco. So you could still say that Peter Parker / Spider-Man did something to fuck up his life.
Right.
What? We don't know. And quite frankly, we don't really have to know.
And we won't be able to know because of rights issues. All right.
Right. And truth be told, I think it's kind of better that, like, he doesn't have that. Because then he can be more of an actual anti-hero and somebody we can root for rather than this kind of weird edgy guy who wants to kill Spider-Man but then also does other shit. But I would like to read more Venom comics that are about the version that come from them.
It's a joke in the movie that due to the biological nature of the symbiote, it's difficult to talk about it without sounding sexual.
The other thing that ties us into our regular segment was the argument online over whether Venom was Spider-Man's Waluigi or Wario. As Ing has pointed out, Carnage is Waluigi.
And it should be noted that in the IO9 Twitter poll, they had a third option, which was just what? And that actually technically won the poll.
As, honestly, well, it should.
Carnage, I don't know what Carnage's deal is. Ing, do you know what Carnage's deal is?
Yeah, okay. The Carnage symbiote is the offspring of the Venom symbiote.
Okay.
And it's latched on to a serial killer called Cletus Cassidy. It's a version of...
Right. It's like they decided Venom was going to be a hero, so they needed a really evil Venom.
Yeah, he very much is made to be a foil for Venom.
Well, Venom was becoming a hero, an anti-hero.
Yeah, because he was popular enough that they realized, okay, we need to make comics about this guy, but we can't really make comics about a villain, so what do? And I guess that's when they made Carnage. So...
The symbiote itself was never much of a real character.
Okay.
Yeah, it never had, like, a personality, whereas the movie gives it a personality, and it's a great personality.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. That's interesting to me, yeah. I was never clear on whether he did a lot of talking to this symbiote and stuff, and it sounds like he didn't in the comics, but...
It might have been more of, like, just, like, that kind of voice that you sometimes hear in your head. I think that's what the symbiote was sort of meant to be, at least originally, whereas now it has its own personality and its own thoughts and things like that, and it's great. It's hilarious.
Makes perfect sense if you're going to have a character who has to kind of talk to himself.
Yeah, when Eddie Brock's merged with it, they use plural pronouns and refer to themselves collectively as Venom, and it's implied that they have thoughts, but it is the collective Venom, and if you separate the two of them, it's not Venom anymore. Yeah,
we've decided we've got to wrap it up a bit, since we're at our limit. Was probably going to be... Don't be sorry, we're at our limit of time. People don't want to... I'm sure some of that stuff about the about politics will get slashed away at.
Oh, God. No. This whole thing is basically a wash. None of this is usable.
Oh, no!
This is going to be the lost episode of Destroy All Clickbait. People will speak of it.
As the editor just fucking destroyed it.
Yes.
Oh.
The evil's defeated.
The entire show is, we are cool. We are agreeing with...
Alright, welcome to Destroy All... Well, that's all for now. I now have to go back to my home planet.
Yes.
Editor's note, Adam died on his way back to his home planet.
That's how I get written out for my, that's how Abby insists I get written out. It's like, I want him off the show, damn it!
Yep.
The guy likes a poo too much. I don't like him. Anyway, I don't know why Abby sounds like J.J. Jonah Jameson in my version.
I want pictures of Spider-Man!
Pictures of Apu, damn it. Alright, so from all of us here at the podcast, we hope your scarometrics stay up, and remember to enable your ad shockers. Good night, kiddies.